by the time of Homer and Hesiod, the earliest known writers or poets
Yeah.
whose works are written down, the the period that they wrote about, the which correlates to the Mycenaean period, they called it the heroic age,
Oh,
was pretty ancient to them already. It was, I believe, 400 years at least have been passed by that time with no literacy in the Greek world. So
yeah.
they were talking about pretty ancient times from their point of view, let alone
Okay.
us.
Oh, wow. I mean, you mentioned Homer, and like obviously he talks a lot, and I think even in your videos, like you've touched upon like the Trojan War and like Achilles and Hector. You actually go into a lot of great detail that even I didn't even know, like Hector, like whole like family and like how he had like so many brothers.
Yeah, I mean, so what I did in the videos was more or less a story that follows the Iliad
Yeah,
and the so-called the early epic cycle that spoke about the Troy. Much of
yeah,
that works, much of those works are gone now. They survive in fragments or as mentions in the works of the later writers. But
yeah,
obviously, the Iliad and the Odyssey are the two big ones. They are you know very available today. So yeah, I mean, I went through that and basically presented those events described there, which is not necessarily how anything historically happened, but that's how they described it. Uh,
yeah,
Pretty much mixed with mythology. I mean, they have gods directly intervening, Zeus weighing in which side is he going to support. So I kind of put gods to the side and just went through the story as how the Iliad described it. So it's pretty interesting how things develop over time orally,
yeah,
with no right with people not writing stuff down, right? Because
yeah,
we consider that Trojan War was believed to had happened at about 1200 BC, a couple of decades give or take. And between that and 800 BCE or 750, where the Iliad was written down, it's more than 4 centuries. So with people not being able to write down accounts, subsequently, right after the Trojan War took place, generations and generations contributed to diversions of the actual story, if it's how it happened. We don't know for a fact what happened to the Trojan War. We know that the city of Troy existed. It was destroyed or sacked a couple of times throughout its um, thousands of years of history. And we do know that about 1200 BC, which is what the Iliad talks about, what Homer talks about, we do know that Troy suffered destruction, immense destruction, and that does correlate with the story of the Trojan War that he talks to. So we know that the Trojan War happened, but we don't know in which capacity. We don't know who fought who exactly. There's no direct contemporary historical evidence
yeah.
the way things went down. So that much we know, but it's amazing how throughout the hundreds of years, uh, story changed, and by the time of Homer, we have the abduction of Helen as the main
Yeah.
reason why the war itself happened. But if we were to think rationally, that was probably not the case.
Yeah. I mean, now, what's funny is we do know like the city of Troy did kind of like actually exist because they
Yeah,
did actually find like the remains and stuff, like yeah, archaeological remains. Now, obviously, we don't know like the full story of what actually happened, right?
right.
But do you think there might be a chance that these characters from the Iliad, right, like the Trojan War, like Achilles and Hector and whatnot, like do you think that these people might have actually existed by any chance? Like,
So I mean, from it's impossible to tell really because
yeah,
there's no direct evidence or proof either way. We don't have evidence of the actual historical names of the rulers and the warriors and warlords that took part in that war in 1200 BC. So we can't say, oh, it was not Achilles, it was this guy, but we can't really say it was Achilles just because Homer says so.
yeah,
So it's very hard for us to say from this point of view. I wish there was some kind of additional evidence that would help us, but what I would presume is that some names are based on the real names that took place in that war. Some
yes,
names are just based on historical people that, people at the time already had foggy memory of. So, and some names are probably completely made up. That's basically how it
yeah,
works, not just in ancient Greece, but basically any kind of oral tradition. The further you go, without writing it down, the more it's gonna divert from the original facts. The more we're gonna have mythology, different stories surrounded happening that don't necessarily have. For example, the ancient Greeks, by the time they wrote down the Iliad, they made no mentions of the Hittites whatsoever, and we know for a fact that Hittites were very important factor in the Western Asia Minor, and uh, even had treaties with the historical kings of Troy. So, but
yes,
there's no mention of that because people forgot about their existence over the hundreds of years. They only remember the great Achilles, Agamemnon, Priam, Hector, Trojan War, and probably added a lot of elements to make for a good story for
yeah,
the classical audience.
yeah. No, that makes sense. That's actually a good point.